What if I told you that the outcome of World War II wasn't decided on the battlefield by the best tank, but instead it was decided by a quiet, hidden battle of numbers, a war of pure arithmetic that was fought in factories thousands of miles away from any fighting? To really get our heads around this, we have to go to the final desperate moments of one of history's most lethal tank commanders.
Ammunition exhausted, enemy unlimited. That's the last thing anyone ever heard from Michael Whitman. Now, on this day, August 8, 1944, his small group of elite Tiger tanks had just done the impossible. They destroyed 27 American Sherman tanks. I mean, that is an incredible tactical victory. But then, as he looked out at the horizon, he saw 48 more Shermans rolling towards him, and behind them, the dust clouds of dozens, maybe hundreds more. In that moment, his genius, his skill, it didn't matter. He was about to be erased by sheer mass. What he was seeing wasn't just another battle. It was the physical proof of an industrial power so vast it made individual brilliance almost meaningless.
And to feel the gut punch of that moment, you have to understand the legend of his machine, the Tiger tank. This thing wasn't just a weapon, it was a myth, a masterpiece of German engineering. It had a massive 88mm cannon that could kill any Allied tank from over a mile away, long before they could even get in range to shoot back. Its armor was so ridiculously thick that most Allied shells just bounced right off. For the soldiers on the ground, the Tiger was the apex predator of the battlefield. It was an invincible monster.
So that's the big question, isn't it? If Germany had this perfect, unbeatable weapon, how on earth did they end up losing the ground war? Well, the answer isn't buried in the mud of Normandy or the snows of Russia. It's actually hidden in the blueprints, on the factory floors, and deep inside the core philosophies of the nations at war.
You see, the answer is that there wasn't just one blueprint for victory. There were two, and they were polar opposites. One country gambled everything on achieving technological perfection. The other bet on something far simpler: pragmatic, overwhelming numbers. This was a head-on collision of industrial ideals, and it was going to decide the fate of the entire world.
And here are those two philosophies, side by side. On the one hand, you've got Germany, chasing engineering perfection. Every single Tiger tank was a handcrafted masterpiece, built by the most skilled craftsmen and designed to be, literally, invincible. Then you have the American philosophy, which was born out of its automobile industry, and it was completely different. To them, the best tank wasn't the perfect one. The best tank was the one that was actually there on the battlefield. The whole goal was to make a good enough tank that could be churned out in unbelievable numbers by everyday people.
This wasn't just some vague idea for Germany. This mindset came directly from the very top. Hitler himself was absolutely mesmerized by the Tiger's power. He and his entire high command genuinely believed that their superior technology could crush any numerical disadvantage. They staked the entire war on this one idea, that a single, perfect machine was worth more than a whole battalion of lesser ones.
Now contrast that with the American directive. This quote from Major General Barnes basically sums up the entire American war strategy in one sentence. From day one, the focus was never on building the best tank. It was about building the most reliable, easiest to fix tank they could design, and then building tens of thousands of them. For the Americans, this war was, at its core, a math problem. They were determined to win.
So, okay, let's leave the strategy rooms and go to the factory floors, because this is where those philosophies became cold, hard steel. This is where abstract ideas met the reality of production. Welcome to the factory front line, the place where the war was actually won. So, building a Tiger tank, it was less like manufacturing and more like sculpting a work of art. It took an absolutely staggering 300,000 man-hours to finish just one Tiger. The factory floor looked more like a medieval guild than a modern assembly line, with master craftsmen overseeing every single tiny, intricate step. The whole process was defined by precision, incredible skill, and mind-boggling complexity.
I mean, listen to this quote from one of the German craftsmen. It captures both their pride and their fatal flaw. It was not mass production, it was art. Can you imagine spending 3 whole days just putting the transmission together? This incredible attention to detail guaranteed amazing quality, but it also created a production bottleneck that was just crippling. They were basically building museum pieces while a war of pure attrition was raging right outside their doors.
Meanwhile, in places like the Detroit tank arsenal, it was like they were on a different planet. They were using the assembly line techniques they'd perfected making cars. American factories took the incredibly complex process of building a tank and broke it down into thousands of simple, repeatable steps. This meant they could hire a workforce with zero experience and still get unbelievable speed.
The time it took to go from a pile of raw steel to a finished, battle-ready Sherman tank, just 48 hours.
And this is the voice of that new American workforce. People who had literally never even seen a tank before were now building them around the clock. This wasn't about individual genius. It was about the raw power of the system. 2 days of training was all you needed because the system itself was designed for simplicity and speed. It wasn't art. It was a relentless, unstoppable engine of industrial war.
Okay, so now let's look at the cold, hard result of these two philosophies. We're about to see the shocking numbers, the brutal arithmetic that made all of Germany's tactical brilliance totally irrelevant. This right here, this is where the war was won and lost.
Just let this number sink in for a second. Over the entire course of World War II, with all of their engineering genius, Germany managed to build exactly 1,347 Tiger I tanks. That's it. That's the entire arsenal of their ultimate weapon.
And here is the American answer to that: 49,234. You see, this wasn't a fair fight. It was an avalanche of steel. For every single Tiger tank that rolled off a German assembly line, the United States built more than 36 Sherman tanks. 36 to 1.
When you actually see it visualized like this, the gap is so vast it's almost hard to believe. The German production bar, you can barely even see it next to the American one. This chart isn't just data. It's a death sentence written in numbers for the German war machine. It shows a production gap so huge that no amount of battlefield heroism could ever hope to close it.
And what's really crucial here is that the German High Command knew this was happening. This wasn't a surprise. As early as January 1943, General Guderian, who was in charge of all their tank forces, saw the intelligence reports on American factory output, and he wrote this in his private diary. He understood the math. He knew right then and there that they were fighting a war they had no mathematical chance of winning.
And the production numbers just created this cascade of other problems. A Tiger tank was so complex that on any given day, only about 35% of them were actually ready for combat. For the simple Sherman, 90%. A Tiger needed 10 hours of maintenance for every single hour it was in operation. The Sherman needed just 1 hour of maintenance for every 10 hours of fighting. It took nearly 4 times as long to train a Tiger crew. And then, there's the most devastating number of all, the human cost. A 75% casualty rate for the men in Tiger crews versus just 2.6% for Americans. I mean, how could any army possibly sustain those kinds of losses?
So let's go to the final act here and see how this industrial math problem actually played out on the battlefield. This is where we finally understand why a good enough tank, when you have an endless supply of them, was so much better than a perfect one. This sheer abundance gave American commanders a kind of strategic freedom that their German counterparts could only dream of. They could afford to trade tanks to take an objective. They knew they could lose 4, even 5 Shermans for every Tiger they killed and still be winning the war of attrition. If a Sherman crew got their tank knocked out, there was often a brand new one waiting for them back at base within 48 hours. Think about the psychological edge that gives you. You fight differently when you know there are 1,000 more tanks right behind you ready to go.
And this quote from a sergeant who had 3 Shermans shot out from under him, it just says everything. The American philosophy, which seemed to treat the machine as disposable, was actually the one that valued the soldier's life more. The tanks were expendable, the trained crews were not. The Germans, with their priceless, irreplaceable masterpieces, were forced into the exact opposite position. They died trying to save the machine, because they knew deep down another one wasn't coming.
And I really don't think there's a better way to summarize this entire story. Nobody's arguing that the Tiger wasn't the better tank, one-on-one. It absolutely was. But like Sergeant Henderson says here, the Sherman was the winner's tank. And if you had the choice, what would you rather be? A dead hero in a technically superior machine, or a winner in the tank that just got the job done?
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here, because this story is about so much more than tanks. It's a timeless lesson. In our own complex world of technology and business and strategy, it forces us to ask, where does true lasting strength really come from? Does it come from striving to create that one perfect, flawless individual thing? Or does it come from building a resilient, adaptable, and abundant system? A system that can take a hit, absorb losses, and just keep on coming, no matter what. That right there is the arithmetic of victory.